I know how I remember how we were introduced, how we met and got to know each other. I am curious going back to this idea of how different people perceive and construct their reality.
I remember our mutual colleague slash mentor, Dr. John Reed, and he, I believe, was your professor. He and I had originally connected when he moved to North Carolina. He reached out to me as a business owner to business owner to connect as he was establishing himself there. Eventually, he wanted me to meet people. He took up the mentorship role quickly and he wanted me to meet people and he introduced us. He's like, you definitely need to know each other. I think like maybe the first time we connected, all of a sudden we're talking about quantum physics and its application to organizational development. And I was like, this person thinks very differently. And she is fascinating. And yeah, I think we just took the conversation into the strangest places and exploring the outskirts of organizational psychology and how other ideas apply. And I find your mind fascinating and how you think about things so interesting. And so that's what I remember.
It tracks with my recollection. So you were right. Dr. John Reed was my professor, but not in graduate school the second time, in graduate school the first time. So I got an MBA. I started in 2005. I finished in 2007. One of the classes that I had to take as part of the core curriculum was International Dimensions of Organizational Behavior. I had never taken a psychology course before. And so my first psychology course was taught by Dr. John Reed. And day one, I sat there going, where has this been all my life? Like, why has nobody told me about this? And it was like learning a language I already knew. It was fascinating to me how all of a sudden I was able to put together and understand patterns of behavior that I had seen over the course of my working life, that I had seen in organizations where I'd volunteered, that I'd seen play out in patterns at school, in clubs, and in classes. And it all just made sense. And then I started to see how readily it applied to what I was doing at work, which was tax. And really, it was all about, well, this is how people in groups interact and behave, and about how they make decisions, and how they evaluate incentives, and how they hold power, and how they come to know themselves in relation to others and their environment. This is really cool. And Dr. Reed is amazing, and he took an interest in me. And he recognized that I just loved this course. And so I would talk to him after class. And then after the course finished, we kept in touch. And as you said, he fills the mentor role easily. It is as easy as slipping on a cap for him. It is one of many hats that he wears, but he puts it on lightly and well. And he started saying things along the lines of, maybe this is a course of study you'd want to pursue. And I wasn't in a position to get a PhD at that point. It had sort of occurred to me. I was like, oh, that would be a really cool thing to do. But it wasn't the time. It wasn't the time, and I wasn't in the place. And so it was fast forward 11 years when I finally said, you know what? I'm going to do this. And that was, so I did. I applied to PhD program, and Dr. Reed wrote my letter of recommendation. And off I went. And then he was the one who encouraged me to join Division 13, to join SCP, the Society of Consulting Psychology. He also invited me to get engaged with, it was just transitioning at that point from SPIM to SPIL, so Society of Psychologists in Management to Psychologists in Leadership. And I've gotten to know so many people in that organization, and there's a lot of overlap in the groups. And I did go on to become more involved in SCP, which is probably an understatement at this point.
Yeah,
And
now you're going for, you started the president role this year. And isn't it amazing? The one seed planted 11 plus years ago and where that seed went, it's just the power of someone seeing something in you that you don't necessarily see, and them like sharing their vision for you and just letting it be, like not pushing you, just letting it be and seeing where it goes. I just think that is so powerful.
It is. And again, thanks to Dr. Reed, he said, join these organizations and there's somebody you have to meet. You have to talk to Mira. And he told me about the award that not only were you nominated for, you won.
Yep.
And then all of the other accolades you've accumulated. And so I was a little nervous to meet you. I was like, wow, she is cool. And then, as you said, in just within the first few minutes of us chatting, it just became obvious that like it was like little fireworks going off. And we were able to just move between these different areas and topics, all with a theme, right? All with connected dots, because both you and I think in systems.
Mhm.
And I just really appreciated that about you, and also how your career has, in a sense, followed that. And at the time, I was also working on teen online safety software, and you very
Mm.
kindly introduced me to your spouse, to your partner in life, who is an incredible academic in his own right. And then we went on to have several great conversations about the overlap in our work in trying to make the world a little bit better for young people trying to grow up and learn how to exist in a constantly changing environment that is imbued now with technology and with more opportunity and also more pitfalls than they've ever had ready access to at really any point in history.
Yeah.
So that's been another really neat connection.
Yeah, and that does remind me, the other thing that I was struck by, in addition to deep mind, full of knowledge at such depth, and like you said, interconnectedness in terms of like crossing over between multiple areas of interest, but also you are a super connector, like a generous super connector. You automatically, without me asking at all, you were like, oh, you should meet so and so and so and so. Let me make introductions. And I was like, wow, I didn't even have to ask. She just removed everything about what's hard about networking. Can you introduce to who do you know? All of that stuff. And you just made it very easy. And I think it just comes so naturally. Like, I think it just like exudes, like even the purpose of this podcast, we were talking before we started, I asked you about it, and like the first thing that you said was all about helping others get to know other people, in your sort of world and our world, my world. And that's just, it's just demonstrates such a generosity.
Generosity is one of my core values.
Yeah, I think for me, I would ditto all of that, adding curiosity. I see that in you. I see that in me. And I value that extremely highly in people. I think curiosity is at the root of how we connect and how we grow, and what we're missing a lot of right now, in addition to the kindness and the empathy. A lot of the books that I write are all coming from that combination of generosity, of wisdom and knowledge, and a curiosity. So like, developing ways to make hard things simple that, people find very challenging around interpersonal skills, for example. How do you make it simple? How do you make it pragmatic? Sharing and decoding all of the sort of insider knowledge that a lot of people have access to, but only when they are in a position of privilege to have that kind of access to information. So like the books that I wrote on workplace politics are all about that. Like we don't get access to that information about how to navigate a system except at a certain level, or because of who we know and how we're connected to power and influence, right? And I wanted to share that widely with everyone once I understood, that world. And now I'm writing a new book about the sort of complex interplay between gender, leadership identity, and achievement identity, and how we've sort of ended up wrapping ourselves up in a pretzel in that, and how you can unwind that pretzel. So it's, all going back to kind of the same values, the idea of sharing ideas, wisdom, the interconnectedness, the systems, the curiosity, all of that stuff.
I'm fascinated to read your new book now.
Thank you.
You know, as you were talking about it, there was a word, you did say it. You said it sort of later on in your description, but there was a word that you said that I realized when I think about you and I think about what I see your whole body of work, not just what you do through Tower Scope and your sort of your professional identity, but how I see you move through the world is about empowerment. Now, you talked about power and influence, and it has always felt to me that you have been working to right injustice, to address injustice, and that the root cause of so much injustice and harm caused in organizations and harm caused in interpersonal relationships has to do with power being abused, power being unfairly distributed, power being hoarded, and thinking about power in a variety of ways.
Thank you, Liz. I know you're not fishing for compliments at all, but there's another strength that I think I experience uniquely from you that is very, very rare, which is your ability to listen to what somebody's saying. And it could be, a whole rambling of, ideas, and then extract the meat of it, and really elevate it to like, what is this about in terms of impact? Like you sort of translate what does this actually mean in terms of impact? Not just like, what is it about your character? Right. And I just find that fascinating. I know that people sometimes say that about me, but I think you raise it to a whole nother level. And it's amazing to be on the receiving end of it, So I'm just going to say that. Yes, I appreciate, you're right. You're absolutely right. I don't use the word empowerment. I think that it was unfortunately co-opted by, I hate to say this, but fake feminists. And, like when they say girl power and, all of that stuff. And it feels off to me for some reason. I'm sure you can explain it better to me than I can explain it to myself, but it's the reason I don't use the word empowerment. Helping people gain a sense of agency and recognizing when they actually do have agency and how, that speaks to me a lot. And I feel like I'm doing a lot of that right now. And you're right. It's really important to me because I feel like a lot of people at this moment, and we'll just say April 25th is when we're recording this. At this moment, there's a lot of learned helplessness. People are very quick to throw up their hands and say, there's nothing more I can do. I can't do, and they sort of don't realize just how much power we each have individually and as a collective. It's sometimes hard to extract that from yourself when you feel like so much has been taken away from you already, or you never realized you had it in the first place. And so I personally feel like, because I always feel empowered to do something, I want to offer that and give it away to others. Like, take it. Here's how, and yeah, so I appreciate that you sort of identified that.
What I'm curious about is the source of that in you, because your level of resilience is off the charts. You are aware of your own agency, and I think you also have an ability to recognize that it is not a single size. How much agency we have in a moment will vary in relation to the boulder we're trying to move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you always do something? Yes, you can always do something. And in some cases, there are people of faith who will tell you that the only thing that they could do in the situation they were in was to pray. And they were still doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't matter whether or not to anyone else it looked like they were doing something. It gave them a sense of power and agency and a greater feeling of control because they were doing something that they believed was a step forward. It was motion, it was movement. And I'm so curious because I've just seen you show up in so many different situations where you could affect a lot of change, where you could affect very little change. And you were situationally aware of that. And you were also sufficiently self-aware that you knew there were still things you could do. And maybe resilience isn't the word for that. I don't know what is, but I've always seen you show up that way and have that. And I'm curious where in you does that come from?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's rooted in just one thing, although I can sort of follow the through line, right? And it is funny because you're right. Maybe resilience is not necessarily it. Just today, a friend of mine texted, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm being my best cockroach self." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, I am the thing you can't squash. I am the thing that like will scurry away and just piss you off just enough. I am the thing that will irritate you and you'll never catch. Like I'm the one that will be so resourceful that it'll work around and, outlive all the rest. I was just playing on that, but I think there's something about resourcefulness and, you know, a scrappiness and a lack of ego around it too. You know, some of it started when, I came to this country from, fascist dictatorship, a communist country. And we started out, living with family and on food stamps and government subsidies and all the things. And I saw my parents being scrappy and resourceful and entrepreneurial and all of that stuff. And I had to do it myself. I had to learn how to navigate, the world of, you know, American school where I was, bullied or made fun of, or people tried to get me in trouble because I couldn't understand what was happening, or, peg things on me or use me as a scapegoat or whatever it is. I always had at least one person in my life that was helping me figure out what to do with that or how to make sense of it. Whether it was like a friend who was decoding things for me or a mentor or whatever. There were plenty of times when I didn't have that and, it felt really bad and I was, in a worse off place. But I think the more experiences I had taking risks and, learning how to create a community around me, a system of resources and support around me, a way to turn it into a learning experience first and foremost, the more and more I was able to just continue developing that resourcefulness, the scrappiness, you can do something. And I will say you're right also in that there have been times when I have had more power and influence and I could have done something with it and chose not to because I personally felt it was unhealthy for me to engage or that the environment wasn't worth my energy and time. And that's, developed a lot over the last, I would say 6 years as I've developed my company and thought about how I wanted to show up for others and thought about what does it mean to support women in leadership and what does it mean to support leaders within disrupted, limited funding environments like the healthcare, government, nonprofit, research and academic sectors that I support. All of that helped me continue to grow in that way as well and help me to learn where I have my boundaries and where I see my, value and worth and whether I want to commit to something or not is a choice. And I don't think a lot of people realize you have the choice as long as you, can figure out what can I do here? Then the next question is, do I want to? And it's okay to say no. I can do this, but I don't want to, right? I have a lot of skills. I can do a lot of things, but I can also choose not to. That is obviously partly rooted in feminism and justice and, having choice. Having choice is the ultimate human right, you know, and that is, I guess, the ultimate power that people have. And not to easily let that go is one of my greatest things on my mind right now.
So what else you got going on, Mira? I mean, I know, so I know that you mentioned it about 6, 7 years ago, you struck out on your own with your own business that was sort of self-branded. And then about a year plus ago, you really did some incredible introspective work. You did work in the market and you rebranded. And now you have another book coming out. You've got more going on. So where's your energy going right now? And what are you excited about that you're working?
So I mentioned that book. It's called Enough is of Never Enough. At least right now, that's what it's called. I'm excited about that. That's probably the number one thing I'm really excited about. The other is that I've been, for the last year and a half, testing out a new leadership development academy. It's the TowerScope Leadership Academy. TowerScope is my company name. What I should say, what I didn't realize a year and a half ago is that I was beginning another startup company by doing this. What I had in my head is, oh, this is the social impact arm of my company. The point is that it's a leadership academy for mid-level managers and leaders who are within limited funding environments or lack of access to leadership, appropriate and adequate leadership development, especially for women in leadership. And so that means, people within the healthcare, academic, STEM, tech industries that I mentioned. I've been, testing it out in lots of different ways, exploring, the ways that our current members are just experiencing what is most helpful to them. I've been trying to think through, is this more of a content-heavy leadership academy, or is this more of a community-heavy kind of networking, connecting, supportive, and right now it's about half and half, but it's still something that I'm experimenting with. So those are kind of the things that I'm thinking through, developing, growing, and there's a million other things, but I'm not going to overwhelm people with that.
Who are the folks you want to be talking to right now?
There's a number of different folks I want to be talking to. First are whoever fits my own podcast, The Hard Skills. I'm starting to look more for leaders who are willing to share their own journey developing those leadership soft skills that are not that easy to develop and how they did it. Of course, I always look for experts who have new frameworks or doing new, fresh research in those areas. The other is, folks who would either be a good fit for or good strategic partner for growing the Leadership Academy. So whether those are, mid-level managers or leaders within those disrupted industries, whether they're organizational misfits feeling like I'm not sure I'm a good fit or this organization is a good fit and I'm looking for a safe private community to think through all of that and to get support around where my next steps are or how do I navigate this, or organizations looking for, a all-in-one community plus content platform that could support their needs in a very affordable, accessible way. So those are, some of the people that I'm kind of looking to connect with and, hear more from.
And I wrote down a couple of names while you were doing that.
No, of course you did, Liz.
More people. I don't think it gets much better than people that I love and respect and admire, knowing other people that I love, respect, and admire, and then coming up with really cool things that bring in new people that then I get to know so that I can love, respect, and admire them.
Absolutely.
It's just, I'm just trying to multiply friends here.
Yeah.
And it works. And I do find that I am surrounded by people who also love people. And you love people.
Thank you so much for having me on. And Always love talking with you and looking forward to our next chat.
Same. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Mira.